Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on this beautiful Wednesday evening here with Terrance. Thank you again for joining us today, Terrance. It's an absolute honor to have you here and be able to share your career pathway with our students today. Uh, as you all have seen and have read on Terrance's bio, Terrance is from Orlando, Florida, and graduated in 2019 from the University of Florida, majoring in finance. His current role is in the finance team at DoorDash, and we're super excited for him to be able to share a little bit of what that looks like, including his career pathway to this point. A very interesting path, and super excited to hear more of what that looked like for you, Terrance. Thank you again for sharing your time, and I'll pass it on to you.
Perfect. Glad to be here, and looking forward to be able to chat with you all. So there's really three things I'm hoping that you guys can get out of this session. So the first one is just general tips on how to get a job out of undergrad, not specific to finance. And then I will tell you more about within finance, what are some possible career paths, common career paths, and then tell you a little bit more about what those paths look like and maybe help you get a feel for if finance might be something that you are interested in. So, a little bit about me. I graduated from high school in 2015, and the only thing I want to say there is I kind of got into finance by just learning about like stock market and just keeping up with finance news. And it was just interesting to me in high school, right? And I actually have a slide later on just common misconceptions about, especially for young people today, like what finance is. I was definitely susceptible to that when I was going through high school. So we'll talk more about that later. And I graduated from college in 2019 from the University of Florida. I'm from Florida originally. I majored in finance, and at UF, I was able to do several internships, got a couple of mentors and networking and all that stuff I'll talk about on the next couple of slides here. I guess one point I want to emphasize, at least from my time in undergrad at UF, was that when it comes to what employers were actually looking for within finance, the finance classes themselves were pretty much the coursework was almost useless in terms of what employers were actually looking for. But the kind of paradox there is you still need to do well in your classes because employers do look at your GPA and you have to keep that up. And so, if I say courses, the coursework was actually kind of useless for getting a job. That means all the actual practical job related skills and knowledge had to be self-taught. And this wasn't just me, like all the other people who had gone through the finance recruiting pipeline. We had to basically teach ourselves all the relevant skills and knowledge to do well in interviews. And I can explain this a little bit more in the next couple of slides too. And then my last point, just on my college experience, was that getting a job in finance was much, much more difficult than I expected. And this goes especially for anyone who might be like a straight A student or a good student, because I was a straight A student in high school. I did well in my college classes, and I kind of thought that my place in the world would kind of be guaranteed and safe. But in actuality, that's very, very far from the truth. There's a lot of extra work you need to put in, and I'll explain more what I mean by that. But after college, I went on to work in investment banking at Wells Fargo Securities. Did that for about 2 years, and then moved on to corporate finance, which is where I am now. So yeah, so these first two slides are not specific to finance, because I know a lot of you might not be interested in finance, but this is just general advice on how to get a job out of undergrad, and this will apply to many fields, not just finance. So what I want to make clear on this slide is you can really boil this whole thing down to just two pieces, right? You've got networking and doing well in interviews, and both of these are super important. Networking, it can be a lot of things. It can be, one approach is to cold message people on usually alumni on LinkedIn and do informational interviews with them. Informational interviews are basically setting up a call with someone to learn about their job history, their work history, get some advice from them on how to either recruit for that field or just learn more about that field in general. And that's basically how you establish a network, start building out a network. Once you start talking to a few people, you can ask for introductions to other people. And eventually that can lead to opening up job or internship opportunities. Another great resource is your college, your school might have a career resource center with networking events with professionals. Like sometimes companies will come to town and recruit from your school on recruiting trips, and there might be events, social events set up where students can meet with the representatives, the employees at these companies, the recruiters at these companies. So highly recommend attending those events if they're available to you. Otherwise, you can do a lot of this work yourself just by messaging people and setting up informational interviews. So that's networking. And then the other piece is just doing well in interviews because it doesn't really matter how fit you might be for the job if you can't show that in an interview setting. Ideally you know, ideally this wouldn't be a big factor, but in the real world, you do need to learn how to interview well, which is which can be a distinct skill set from knowing how to do the job well. Luckily, there are study guides for this stuff. You can either Google, ChatGPT them, or companies will sometimes, depending on your field, have like career specific interview study guides. So those are a huge resource for everyone who recruited in finance when at UF. And those study guides are basically it's kind of like taking a test if you know what the questions are on the test. That's what those study guides are for. And then if you study those guides and practice a lot, that's how you get well at interviews. This is a skill that needs to be developed and practiced like any other skill. Some of the people I knew were just naturally charismatic and great at interviewing. I was not that, and I had to learn how to do this well through a lot of practice. So these are just the two main pieces of, how to get a job in general. And internships are great because they support these two aspects, right? Internships can expand your network, and they can also give you the relevant experience that you can talk about in interviews. So that's how internships play into this whole process, which is it helps build your network and also helps you do better in interviews. And then, networking too, like I said earlier, the bigger network you have, the more likely it can result in interview opportunities for you that can open up more jobs and internship opportunities. So this is really the core of, the core of what it takes to get, specifically, I guess, a white collar job out of undergrad. And you know how earlier I said that getting a job in finance was much harder than I thought? It's that these two things, networking and like learning how to do well in interviews, required investing so much time and effort outside of your classwork, outside of my classwork, to pick, to do this stuff. And more than likely, you will have to invest a lot of time outside of doing well in classes to build a network and learn how to interview well. And that was really something I didn't really know going into college in freshman and sophomore year, was that how much time would have to be spent doing these things. But it is time well spent. So the next slide here is more specific practical advice for getting a job. And this is general, not just finance specific, right? So I'll go through each of these one at a time. Well, first thing is get started doing this stuff as soon as possible. The sooner the better, because you can build a bigger network and open up more opportunities and so on and so forth. So yeah, build your network through informational interviews. You can look up, on Google, you can find more information on, there's so much out there on what informational interviews are and how to do them well. A basic approach is to just cold message alumni on LinkedIn, ask them for a call, to set up a call with them, and yeah, do these interviews. And through these interviews, this is kind of how you start building those informal mentor-mentee relationships, because all a mentor relationship is just someone who gives you advice, who you can go to for advice. And so it's kind of a two-way street. You set up these calls, and then after the call, you follow up as needed ask for advice or show them how you've acted on their advice and ask them what's next, right? And these contacts, your network can help you expand your network by giving you more contacts. And especially if you are still like a freshman, sophomore, junior, highly recommend trying to find older students at your school who have successfully gone through the recruiting process because they know much more about how this is working right now than I do because I graduated back in 2019. Some of my knowledge might be stale at this point, but those students who are just a year or two above you, they know more about what the job market is doing currently and can give you better advice as well. So this the older students at your school are a great resource. So try to contact them either through joining like student groups or other means. The next advice here is to join student clubs, hopefully relevant to the field you want to pursue, and try to take on meaningful roles. I have leadership roles in here, but they don't have to be leadership. They just have to be some type of role where you're being active in the club and the group, not just a passive participant, passive member. The idea here is you just want to do things with these groups and to give you experiences and stories that you can then use in interviews for internships and jobs. To me, that's kind of the whole purpose of joining these clubs and groups is to give you those stories that you can speak to during those interviews. The next bullet here is, figure out what your career center at your school is offering and try to participate in those events early on because those advisors at these career centers, they know which companies recruit on campus, the recruiting timeline for different companies, and basically what you should do when you should do it to to be on the right timeline for these recruiting cycles. And these career centers will also offer resume help, interview practice and prep, and probably other services as well. They are a great resource, and you should try to see what they offer as soon as possible. The next one is getting internships, just because, a lot of the times, the more you have, well, I mean, you probably capped at just doing one internship a year, mostly during the summer. But the idea here is as you get one or two internships before you graduate, it'll be easier for you to find a full-time job just because a lot of employers, if they're recruiting straight from undergrad, they will be looking for, have you done an internship before? Do you have any sort of relevant experience, right? So that's where internships help. Internships also help you, like I said earlier, interview better because they give you more experiences that you can mention during your interviews to make you stand out from everyone else who's applying. So for internships, you can ask your network for opportunities or your career center might also opportunities. Like I know some colleges might offer structured summer internship opportunities, like summer internship programs, I guess. For example, my younger sister was a freshman last year, and her school, they had a summer internship program just for freshman students that you can apply to, and they will place you in internships, mostly with nonprofits for the summer. And that's what she did for her freshman year. And yeah, your on-campus career center will definitely know about these, and that's why you want to get plugged in, contact the campus career center as early as possible. The other thing about internships is that a lot of the times, a lot of these jobs, especially in finance, junior year internships, so this internships that you do the summer of your junior year can then convert to a full-time job offer the following year, which means your entire senior year, you don't have to worry and stress about finding a job. And then, yeah, I guess my last bullet here is like to kind of show you the kind of effort, when I say like the effort and putting in the effort for some of this stuff is when I was able to get a freshman year summer internship. And the way I did that was I had to basically I looked up all the different wealth management firms in my hometown. I emailed like 30 plus of these firms, just telling them, hey, this is who I am. I am interested in a summer opportunity, and please let me know if you guys have any openings. And of those 30 plus cold emails, I only got a couple responses, like 3 or 4 responses. Only one ended up actually interviewing me, and that was the same one that I actually was able to convert to a summer internship, which is super lucky in hindsight, but that's just kind of the level of effort sometimes and kind of scrappiness and just putting yourself out there that is required as part of this process. My last bullet here is if you want to, after this call, if you do know you want to do a career in finance, you could think about kind of assembling a yearly playbook almost of like, these are kind of the milestones you need to hit to set yourself up for either that junior year summer internship or get you on track for full-time recruiting. And that is also a great thing that your on-campus career advisors can help you with. Just assembling like, hey, these are the milestones I need to hit for the next year or two to set myself up well. And yeah, I'm also happy to give you advice as well. My contact information's at the end here. And then, yeah, my last takeaway here is that, you know, getting any white collar job these days out of undergrad. I mean, it's always been hard and it's only getting harder with AI. I actually saw, especially just in the last few months, more people are talking about this, how AI is actually making it more difficult for undergrads to get entry level roles. But, that's not a broad generalization. There are exceptions to that. But yeah, getting any job is difficult and getting a good finance job is even more difficult. And all of this is going to require a lot of effort, and I say, grit, persistence, dedication on your part. And the good news here is that you're just competing against your peers. You're competing against everyone else, all the other undergrads that are going for these openings, for these very limited openings, right? So a lot of this is within your control, which is how much effort you invest into your network and learning how to interview well. And the idea is the more effort you put into this process, the higher your likelihood of success. So that's the good news, that you do have control of your fate here. And the last part is like a large majority of just within finance and business majors, a lot of them don't end up getting a job relevant to finance or business, right? It's just because there aren't openings for everyone. And so that's why I recommend you invest all the effort to do all this stuff to set yourself up for success. But yeah, that's all I have on this slide. The other slides from here on out are more tailored towards finance specific stuff, but these two slides I think are just super helpful for practical advice for how to get any job. All right, so my first slide on finance is going to be like just talking about some misconceptions here because finance is talked about so much in the media, in entertainment. So I assume a lot of you have probably seen The Wolf of Wall Street. It's what he does in that movie. Those are not mainstream. That is not a mainstream finance career. It's what's known as like a pump and dump kind of scheme, which is illegal and which is why he gets arrested in that movie, right? Now, if you've seen that movie, you might remember at the very beginning where he's with Matthew McConaughey's character, his first job. That job is a real job. It's called being a stockbroker, but these days it's no longer a real career path. It used to be a much bigger thing in the 80s and the 90s. So Wolf of Wall Street, not really realistic at all. The next part here is some of you may or may not know about day trading. If you don't know about it, don't worry about it. But if you do know about day trading, I just want to tell you it's not a viable long-term career because this is not a skill set. It is basically gambling at the end of the day, and it's a valid hobby because a lot of people I work with, both in banking and in my current job, they do this stuff, stuff like this for fun. It's just entertainment, but it's not a career path. Now, hedge funds are a real thing, but they don't do like this day trading stuff. They do much more complicated analysis. And I do have a slide on hedge funds later if anyone knows what that stuff is. Yeah, and actually, like in the chat, if you know what hedge funds are, please let me know because I don't know if anyone here knows about hedge funds or day trading, but that would just be helpful for me to know if anyone, I guess, knows what these things are. But yeah, so Billions is another well-known show. The Big Short was a big movie, both great entertainment. So these are about hedge funds. Now, hedge funds really don't hire directly from undergrad, but I'll tell you, I have a slide on like what the path to a hedge fund is, which is what they do on Billions and The Big Short. And then these two shows, I don't know if anyone, well, Industry is another show, Margin Call is a movie. I don't know if anyone knows about these two, but this is sales and trading. It is a real job, but it's much harder to get. And these days, there's lots of AI automation. So I will skip talking about those career paths today. Yeah, Industry is a great show. Yeah, sales and trading. People still, even back when I was graduating, when I was job hunting, sales and trading was already very few openings. These days, it's probably even fewer because that type of job is very automatable with AI. So it's very susceptible to AI, and it's also nowhere near as fun as industry projects it to be. Um, yeah, and if there's any other movies or TV shows you want me to opine on, please put it in the Q&A, and I'll come back and hit it later on, and I can tell you how realistic they are. Um, okay, so. All right, so let's say you're an undergrad and I'm specifically and like let's say you're a business finance or a finance major or you want to explore a business or finance career path. Now, on this slide, I do say majors business finance, but it's possible to hit these career paths even though your major is not business or finance because I know a common fields are like if you're in industrial engineering or maybe a different type of, or yeah, a lot of times you'll have engineers, like people who are engineering majors who do want to transition to finance out of undergrad. That's totally possible. So on this slide, what I'm trying to make the point of is like not all, as an undergrad, your option set is constrained a little bit because not all companies will hire from undergrad. For example, DoorDash does not hire from undergrad for finance roles. Um, the only roles they hire from school are like PhDs in engineering. Um, Now, as an undergrad, here are some of your options. Investment banking, corporate finance, management consulting, and startups. I'll talk more about each one of these. But I also want to say that this is not all the options you have. Like my call out down here is that there are many other options. The ones up here, the four of them up here are the only ones that I kind of know about. Other options for a lot of undergrad business and finance majors are a big one is accounting, audit, and tax. And I think I saw someone in chat say that they were on the accounting track. Yeah, in my opinion, like if you go to a school that has an accounting program and has those alumni networks with accounting firms, that is a very viable option. It's a very, to my knowledge, now this is I'm kind of speaking out of turn here because I don't know that much about accounting. I perceive it to be a pretty reliable and stable career path. The income, the pay isn't the highest, but the work-life balance is also better than a lot of what I have on the screen. Automation, see, I don't know because I don't know. That's a good question. You'll want to investigate and maybe ask people who do work in accounting today. Um, Based on what I see, because I work with accounting folks at DoorDash, there's so many weird edge cases and nuances all the time, and real life processes are messy. I think it's less susceptible to automation, but that's just my opinion. I don't know what the truth is there. So accounting is a real field that you may want to look into. Commercial banking is also a field. So commercial banking is when banks will lend money to either people or businesses. I don't know much about commercial banking, but a lot of times it's the same banks. Like Wells Fargo, for example, they have an investment banking division and they also have a commercial banking division. I just don't know a lot about commercial banking at all. Um, and but yeah, that's something that is a viable option that does hire out of undergrad as well, commercial banking. Wealth management is basically managing money for mostly rich clients. And then there's other, there are other options. My point is, it's just these four are the ones that I know about, and I'm going to talk more about those four. And I guess lastly, as you think about these career paths, you do want to just quickly search, um, how susceptible these might be to automation. Because I haven't been at the entry level with these jobs in a while, so I don't have the latest details. But if you do some Google searching or ChatGPTing, you'll find maybe forums where people are discussing what these actually look like today. And Carla, I assume like you're monitoring the chat, right? So if there's any questions that I just don't hit, please, we can circle back to those at the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, all right. So of these options on the screen, one thing I want you to notice is that the work-life balance, none of them say good, right? This is something about these paths, these more finance paths up here these are not good, real good work-life balance, options. But that's the truth. Like everyone wants a job that pays well, but has great work-life balance. I don't really know a job that does that. Especially out of undergrad. Especially out of undergrad, you have to kind of pay your toll, I guess, in terms of working hard. Now, of these options, investment banking is the most lucrative. It also has the worst work-life balance. And you'll find that the ones that have pay the most money have the worst work-life balance. That's just the trade-off that you have to make for yourself uh, regarding what you want to do. Corporate finance out of entry level, it has the lowest of the options on the screen, of these four options, it has the lowest income, but it has the best work-life balance out of the options on my screen here. Management consulting is very valid. They hire out of undergrad. The pay is not as high as investment banking, but it's better than corporate finance to my understanding. The work-life balance is not as bad as banking, but also not great. And Carla, I think you've had speakers before for management consulting, right? So, um, I'd reference those materials there. And then another option is like startups, but that can mean a lot of different things. It could be a student-run startup, it could be an established startup. You're That's hard to generalize. Um, okay, so let's talk about the career path that I took. So what I did was I went from undergrad to investment banking, and then I went straight to corporate finance. I guess more advanced roles in corporate finance. So this is still corporate finance. It's not an entry level role. It's more of a higher up role, and that's where I am today. Um, what other people do if they go to investment banking is they will then go to what's called private equity. You make more money than banking and you make more money than corporate finance, even what I have today, but your work-life balance is still pretty bad. And then from then on, what most people do is they either go to graduate school and then transition to like some leadership role in corporate finance, or they go to corporate finance as well. Um, And of course, like what people can also do is they can stay within any one of these boxes, right? So some people will go into investment banking, they will stay in investment banking and just climb up the ranks there. Or they will go to private equity and just stay in private equity and climb the ranks there. But if people move, they usually, move on to these paths here. And, another option is to go directly into corporate finance out of undergrad and I guess just kind of stay there and climb up the ranks there. Um, this is highly simplistic. I'm not going to claim that these are the only possible moves out of, after undergrad. But these are just some of the more common stylized routes that are possible. And of course, if you go into management consulting, there's a whole other set of options that I don't have on my screen because I don't really know what those are. Um, okay. So let's move on here. Oh yeah, my next slide is on hedge funds. So hedge funds, again, this is what they do on Billions and The Big Short. So they don't hire from undergrad, right? So usually what happens is most people will go to investment banking, then go to private equity, and then get recruited into hedge funds. So this is like you're looking at like 5+ years between undergrad. Well, yeah, 5 or 6 years between undergrad to actually getting to a hedge fund. I have a friend who actually did this. He went to an Ivy League school, went to one of the top investment banks on the street, one of the best private equity firms, and now he's working at a hedge fund, making a lot of money, like a really silly amount of money. Um, so, and it's very exciting stuff. But otherwise, what a lot of people do, what some people might do, is they would go from undergrad, go to graduate school, get a master's in like statistics or like computer science or engineering, get a PhD, and then like hedge funds will recruit PhDs, but they won't recruit people without a lot of experience one way or the other. Okay, so I think how many? Yeah, all right. I have only 2 slides left here, so we're doing pretty good on time. Um, this slide, I want to talk about the difference between investment banking and corporate finance, which is basically the difference between, these first 2 options up here, investment banking and corporate finance. So yeah, like I said before, investment banking is the most lucrative, usually the most lucrative post-grad job option for a business or finance major. But this is the key point. The work-life balance is basically non-existent. You've got 12-hour, you're working 12-hour days and you work weekends as well. And the typical cycle, the typical length of an investment banking analyst program is 2 years. And if you stay in banking, you'll keep working these hours for a couple more years, or you can move on to other options. And this is actually one of the reasons why people only do this for 2 years out of college, and they will move on to other stuff because the work-life balance is quite bad. Corporate finance, on the other hand, lower income, but slightly better work-life balance. And by the way, corporate finance, you'll find, is a very generic term. A lot of times you'll see this go by other names. A most common one is FP&A, financial planning and analysis. And you'll also see strategic finance. Those are all, you can put them all under the corporate finance umbrella. Those mean very similar things. So, what is investment banking? Investment banking is if you, investment banks, what they do is they help companies do several things. So, an investment bank might help a company like, let's say, NVIDIA, for example, since they're in the news a lot. Investment banks would help companies like NVIDIA do things like raise money via issuing debt or equity, which is basically stocks. Or they will help companies like NVIDIA buy other companies or sell themselves to other companies. Um, so buying other companies and selling themselves to other companies is what's called mergers and acquisitions, also known as M&A. So investment banks are basically helping companies do things, So the day-to-day work is very much you're in Excel, Microsoft Excel all day doing financial modeling. And you're also working in PowerPoint, making slide decks to basically pitch these ideas, these transactions to companies. So that's what banking is. If you want me to, if you have a question on this, I can come back to this in Q&A because I know a lot of people might not understand a lot of this stuff, but I'm happy to go deeper if you want. On corporate finance, what do? They basically track how much money a company is making over time. This is just a profit and loss, P&L. How much profit and loss is a company making over time? And it's very reporting focused, right? Very simply, how much money is our company making? The day-to-day, it's still in Excel because all finance jobs are like this. You do all your P&L reporting and tracking in Excel. And then you might also work with dashboarding programs like Tableau or Power BI to basically track performance. A big difference between these 2 options is the type of questions you're asking. Because in corporate finance, the questions you're asking is how much money is our company making? And 2, how can our company make more money? What should our company do to make more money? That's corporate finance. Whereas investment banking is much more focused on, I work for a bank. How much is this company that we are helping? How much are they worth to other companies? How much money are they worth to other companies if another company wants to buy it? That's what investment banking is focused on. So for investment banking, it's very fast-paced, competitive, constant deadlines. You learn a lot about various companies and industries. And it's a good career path if you are trying to get the most money out of undergrad and you don't mind the workload. and you don't really care about having a good work-life balance because the work ethic is really hardcore with long hours, high pressure. You need Yeah, it's really a really fast-paced and high-pressure environment. But if you think you can handle it and you don't mind working a lot, um, not seeing your friends as often as you'd like, then it's a feasible option for you. Um, Now for corporate finance, it's much more about working with one company every day. And so if you really want to understand how a single company, a specific company's business model works, that is a good, that is a good, the corporate finance is where you will get that experience. And it's also a good place to be if you want to, help one business grow sustainably over time. If you want a better work-life balance, corporate finance is a better option. And yeah, you get to really go deep on one company's business model versus investment banking, where you have to work across many different companies and many different industries. I guess the one constant between these two options and really all finance jobs is attention to detail. What that means is like being very being very like you're able to very to see small details in financial numbers and be able to do things, do tasks, complete tasks day to day without making mistakes, right? So usually this means you probably get pretty good grades because all this really means is can you color within the lines? Can you follow a set of instructions? Can you do things perfectly again and again and again? That's what attention to detail is. And in investment banking, corporate finance, you do need to have that skill set. And yeah, and actually just in many jobs too. Like a lot of well, you will not be successful in finance or in any of these jobs if you are sloppy with your work, if you make mistakes a lot of the times with doing things, if you aren't able to follow instructions fully. Um, yeah, this is a key skill set that you need to have in order to be successful in finance is attention to detail. And like I said, a lot of the times this means you probably have a really good GPA because you're good at ticking boxes, um, and doing things by the book. So that's kind of my spiel on what investment banking is versus corporate finance. And Carla, you sent me these questions earlier, like general questions. So I figured I'd hit these first and get them out of the way. So when did I realize I wanted to get into finance? Well, I guess investment banking in particular. So I made that decision for myself in my sophomore year, I guess midway through my sophomore year, because I spent a lot of time in freshman year and sophomore year learning about the different options for an undergrad out of finance. And just as a finance major, banking was the most lucrative path to a full-time job directly out of undergrad. There are other options, right? Corporate finance, commercial banking, but for me, it was just the most straightforward path. So I did kind of take the easy way out in that sense by taking just a very conventional path. Um, how do you discover your passion? So my advice there is just be curious, learn about all the career path options that are open to you. Invest a lot of time to learn about what those jobs actually entail. And a good way to do that is through those informational interviews with alumni, right? Or other people. And you can also self-educate yourself here just by reading stuff online, taking online courses if needed. And yeah, like to really know what you want to do, you have to invest the time to figure out what the different options are for you, right? Um, how do you prepare yourself for your career outside the classroom? So for investment banking, there are companies like Wall Street Oasis is a big one that actually sell courses and that sell courses where they teach you the Excel and financial modeling skills. And they also sell interview guides. So this is where I'm saying, like, this goes back to my point earlier about how the classwork is very not useful for getting a job. You have to go outside the classroom, look for these courses and interview guides that are specific to the field you want to do, and just study them and practice them. I actually ended up spending basically more time doing this stuff than I did on my actual coursework, when I was doing recruiting. Um, Mentors. So yeah, my mentors basically were older students at UF who had gotten those internships and gone through the recruiting process for investment banking. They were the ones who taught me how to navigate the process, like the rules of the game, how to play the game, and how to network, what interview guides to study, and so on. And I found them basically by joining those finance related student orgs and clubs. And that's how I got in touch with these people who had already gone through the process and they know what to do. And they could tell me and give me advice on what to do. And frankly, I would have never been able to figure all this stuff out by myself. I would not be where I am today if I did not have these older students who were able to mentor me through the process. And so this was super important to me and will likely be important to you as well. And this also goes for like any other career path, right? Join those student groups, find those older students who have successfully found jobs, or internships, and they can give you advice on how to, um, on what you should do. And of course, the career resource center, the career resource centers are another great option for this. Networking, yeah, networking is big even after undergrad. Like I'm only at DoorDash because I had a friend in my network who knew someone else who was working at DoorDash on this team. And that's how they got my resume in front of the recruiting team. Because all these job openings online, there are tens of thousands of resumes. There's like each job opening has tens of thousands of people applying for them. And so, more likely than not, applying online itself, it's useless. You need to, a lot of the times, the way this works is you will hopefully either know someone already at these companies or have someone else make an introduction on your behalf to someone at these companies who will then flag your resume to the recruiting team so that you will then get an interview opportunity. And then, of course, you have to do well in the interviews too. But to get the interviews in the first place, that's where the networking is big. Because if you just apply to these openings yourself, you will likely not get you will likely get auto rejected. Um, Even for me, like this was after getting into investment banking and having one corporate finance job, I would have been auto rejected from this DoorDash opening most likely. Um, so the networking is a long-term thing. Um, yeah, goals and aspirations. Yeah, so I think with my skill set, I think I want to maybe one day join an early stage, maybe startup company to build kind of a finance team from scratch using the lessons I've learned in all of my finance jobs so far. Yeah, doubting my career choice. So I, you know, I was always very interested in math and statistics and was pretty good at that stuff. If I had to do it all again, I might have tried to do an engineering path instead of business and finance. For me, like I was already like midway through my college career, like deep in the finance track, that pivoting to like engineering would have required a couple more years of schooling, retaking classes, doing a lot of investing more time, and I just wasn't willing to make that trade. But, if I'd gotten if I knew more about what the real life career options are, I may have chosen like a more hard path, a more tangible path like engineering. It might have been a better fit just for me. Um, and yeah, I mean, the top advice for someone looking to explore this career or any career, like I said before, start early. And I have that slide at the beginning with all the practical advice. But yeah, I mean, that's all I have. I have my contact here. Feel free to follow up with me if you want to discuss anything about your situation but yeah, I'm always happy to chat. I'm quite busy these days, so I might not be able to respond, promptly, but I will try to, help you out if I can. So, all right, yeah, that's all I have. We have some questions for Q&A. So,
Yes, we do. Thank you, Terrance, so
yep.
much for sharing your experience and, just all your expertise. Thank you.
Mhm.
And yeah, we do have a couple questions starting with Jonathan. He shared that he is majoring in political economy and possibly interested in emphasis with an emphasis in finance.
Mhm.
Would his major make sense when applying to jobs or yeah, like what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah. So the good news is the class, like I said before, the classwork doesn't really matter. It's not helpful for like job specific, for finance job specific, job specific skills. So what you'd want to do is two things, right? So going back to this slide, you want to build a network of alum or of build a network in finance. Um, Reach out to people on LinkedIn or reach out to alumni on LinkedIn, try to get them on the phone. And before you do, learn how to do an informational interview properly. Have those informational interviews with them. Explain your story. Explain, why you are interested in finance or why you are trying to learn more about finance. And then once you start building your network, then you can study for those interviews yourself. Go find those interview study guides, those financial modeling courses. You can learn those skills yourself. And actually, that's helpful to like tell your network that, hey, I know my major is in finance, but I am taking the time to learn to teach myself how to do financial modeling. I'm taking these classes. I'm doing these interviews. I'm taking these courses for, you know, modeling and Excel. And I'm also doing these interview study guides. I'm willing to invest the time to learn the job specific skill set, and that should be good enough. Um, so hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, like you don't have to be a finance major to do a finance path to get a finance job, but you will have to invest the time to build your network and learn how to interview well.
Thank you, Terrence. I see Saul. Feel free to unmute yourself if you.
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I just have a quick like question though. So like just giving your experience like transitioning from like traditional like finance, investment banking, corporate finance. How was this transition like to more like tech role at DoorDash? Especially like given like I don't know, like it's a very commonly used app, but like from like doing much very much like in the big bang to like a very like fast-paced tech world. You could talk about like the transition more or less.
Yeah, so I'm still doing finance at DoorDash, right? So it's not that different. What I will say is that corporate finance, the skill set is a little bit different from banking. So that's why when most people do banking, they go into private equity because that is a very similar skill set. It's a slightly different skill set to go into corporate finance, but luckily I had already gotten another corporate finance job first, which made it easier for me to get recruited into corporate finance at DoorDash. Um, obviously another path here is just to do corporate finance straight out of undergrad, and then you get that corporate finance skill set, right? So at the end of the day, it's like, do you have the skills to do the job that people are hiring for? Um, that's really all it comes down to. Did I answer
Thank
your question,
you.
or were you asking something different? Okay.
Though like
Um,
finance.
Awesome. Thank you. Go ahead, Jipper.
Oh, hello. My name is Dripper, and basically, I'm a rising freshman at UCLA. I'm studying
mhm,
business economics,
mhm,
and I think I really resonated with what you said. How sort of like in your freshman year, you really didn't know specifically what you wanted to specialize in, and I feel like I'm in that sort of boat right now. So what was it that you specifically did from freshman to sophomore year where you fully decided IB was something that I wanted to pursue? And I know
mhm,
you mentioned a little bit about informational interviews. I've actually had some informational interviews these past 2 weeks. One was with a financial analyst at I think it was a healthcare company, and another one was the father of one of my friends in UCLA, and they worked for 15 years at one of the top five consulting companies. So I learned a little bit about that, but I feel like hearing people describe these jobs is very different than actually experiencing the work. So how would you recommend I navigate this path?
Yeah, so the way to actually get that experience would be to get an internship, right? So now, for freshmen, for like freshman sophomore level, you will have to, most companies do not have internship, like official of internship programs at the freshman sophomore level. So what that might look like for you is it might have to be unofficial. Like maybe you have to talk to, go back to those people that you've spoken with and be like, hey, do you think you could, um, you know, I want to get more experience. Do you have any, do you know of any options, either at your firm or anyone else in the area that might be, um, that might have an opportunity over the summer for like a freshman or sophomore, right? Because, like I said earlier, the way I got my freshman internship was just by cold emailing 30 wealth management firms in my area. I know other students, when that were part of my class, they would do this, they did the same thing, but for like local small investment banks, right? Or other finance like firms in your area. So yeah, you can either cold email people or ask your network to either to maybe introduce you to people who might have those opportunities, or if your network is strong, maybe they're willing to just take you on for summer so you can learn about, so you can help out. Um, yeah, this is where the kind of it's not set in stone the way junior year internships are, where companies will have those, they recruit every year. For freshman, sophomore, you kind of have to figure something out on your own. Um, yeah, or like I said, I don't know if your school would have, if the career center at your school has like structured opportunities for freshmen and um, sophomores, they might. So yeah, my advice is, yeah, informational interviews are good, but you want to get those internship opportunities sooner, yeah, as soon as possible, right? Oh, yeah. And another way, right, is like through student orgs. Because like at UF, there was a student-run investment fund where we actually got like real money, like a couple $100,000 from the UF endowment, and we as students were investing that money ourselves as part of like a whole group, and we had a whole process, investment process, and we were basically operating as like almost a hedge fund, right? That was investing real dollars that the UF endowment had. Now, obviously, most schools are not going to have that. A lot of schools probably don't have that, but there might be clubs that do stuff like that. And, at UF, I know some students who didn't get it, who, this group would do interviews, right? Some students would not get into this fund, this investment fund, because they failed the interview. So they'd start their own thing where they would do like just paper trading with, and yeah, just you might have to get creative here, but that's part of the game, I guess. I think they're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you,
Hi.
Terrance. We have time
Yes,
for one
yes.
more question, Martha.
Yeah.
Oh,
Carl, there are yeah, I'm happy to do that, and there are other questions too, I think, in the chat. So I'm good to run
Yes.
along because I know some people have asked questions here. So
Okay,
yeah,
awesome. Just
I can hit all
perfect.
the
Thank you,
ones in the chat.
Terrance.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Martha.
So my first question would be, with getting into finance while majoring in nursing science, like,
Mhm.
would it be possible? If so, how?
Yeah. Interesting. So yeah, I mean, if you're it almost like my perception is that nursing might actually be an easier path than finance. But look, if you have your own reasons for wanting to do finance, that's fine. It'd be the same advice I gave. I think my first response to Jonathan, I think, right? Yeah, like someone who doesn't major in finance, you have to build your network with alumni in finance, or and then invest the time to learn all the job specific skills via the study guides, the interview guides, and then those courses. It's the same advice. But I am curious, so like, if you are majoring in nursing science, I guess, what is making you want to consider finance?
Honestly, I looked into finance a little bit and I found it a little bit interesting.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that it would be really cool to like branch out into that field, especially while like majoring in nursing science.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, it is possible. I guess, yeah, it's just an interesting thought. Okay. And I see you have two more questions. Are they the ones in the Zoom chat?
Yes, and I
Yeah.
believe you want to ask your question, Samuel?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, that's great. So I think my question sounds awkward on text. So basically, like what you did with since you graduated in 2019 and you just like cold emailed people, let's
Mhm.
just say there's like a young person trying to reach out to you. What would you want for them to do to reach out to you in this current like environment because you are a person of your industry, so you know like the trends, like AI and all that. Like what kind of stuff would you want someone to reach out to you so that if they are like trying to reach out other people within your industry, they like know what to do, if that makes sense? I don't know if I worded it right.
Let me see. How should they go with it? Um, well, I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but I'd say, yeah, I mean, like people who are working professionals, it, w- like it's not awkward to get an informational interview request from a college student at all, because everyone who's working now probably did do it when they were in college, so they're expecting it, and most people are willing to help. It's just, just when you write the email, you want to like proofread it, make sure you follow some conventions, and you can figure it out by either Googling like, hey, how do I reach out to someone cold on LinkedIn? Or these days, I mean, you could either go through ChatGPT and say, hey, and have ChatGPT proofread the email for you. But it's basically in these emails, just say, short introduction of who you are, um, why you are reaching out, and ask if they are willing to basically speak to you on the phone. That's really all it is. Okay, so I
Thank
think
you.
Martha, I think you had two more questions here, right? So I'll quickly hit them. How's networking like for you when you first started? Um, yeah, I mean, so I did the exact thing of reaching out to alumni on LinkedIn. And so on LinkedIn, there's like you can search for people. There's like search filters, and you can filter for people who went to the same school as you and who have a job in finance or banking or whatever. Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I reached out to people cold and then ask if they'd be willing to speak to me. You can just say have an informational interview with me, and then just get them on the phone and yeah, just ask them. The point of doing these informational interviews is to one, learn more about the field, learn more about the day to day, and then get tips on like recruiting, um, and basically let them know that you are serious about wanting to get a job in this field. And if, and and actually, Samia, like this is important too, right? Like if you give off the impression that you are serious about wanting to put in the work to get to go down this path, people are usually more than willing to like help you and guide you along the process. And that's how that kind of mentorship kind of develops naturally, right? um, you don't ask someone to be a mentor, you turn them into a mentor through all these interactions. um, okay. um, all right, so yeah, I'll just go through the Zoom chat here, Carla, and just quickly hit anything that I don't think I
Yeah, absolutely. I think
hit.
Nafu and Jipper had a very similar like IB question. If you wanted to combine those.
Okay. So how is the culture in corporate finance and IB different? Uh, yeah, IB, I'd say, yeah, that is true, but these days you don't need to be in a frat at all. It's not that, yeah, limited cases, there's some nepotism, but like I was at UF, not part of a frat at all. I just built that network from the ground up, um, and Wells Fargo was one of the banks that would recruit from UF, and so that's kind of how that works. The culture is it's similar these days. I mean, IB in the 80s and 90s or 70s was much different, much more, you know, much more wild. But these days, it's much corporate finance and IB are both very, professional fields, um, good gender balance, all that stuff. So it's very removed from the old days. Um, Okay, so let me. I'll just go up in the Zoom chat. Uh, uh, okay. looking into corporate banking yesterday, but I saw that most companies recruit corporate bankers with 5-6 years of finance experience. So yeah, corporate banking. So um, I thought there was corporate banking or commercial banking. I actually don't. I know those are two different things, corporate banking and commercial banking. I don't know the specifics about how they are different. But I'm pretty sure they do recruit from undergrad. Like, for example, when I was at UF, Bank of America would have like a corporate commercial banking program that they would recruit straight from undergrad for. So I guess it depends on the bank. And this is where your career resource center might be able to help you out, because they will know which banks might recruit from your school, or might know alumni from your school that work in banking and in corporate banking and can plug you into those programs. But I'm pretty sure they do hire. They, especially the large banks, would have programs that will corporate and commercial banking programs that recruit straight from undergrad. Um, okay. Okay. Yeah, I see a question here about accounting major. It's a stable job, very long hours, very boring with long hours. Yeah, it's not the most sexy thing, but it is stable, right? And I work with accountants a lot in my field, in my day-to-day. And yeah, it's a very, I don't think it's, like I said earlier, it's probably less susceptible to automation because it's so complicated and there's so many exceptions. Okay. Okay. Um, Carla, is there anything big I missed?
Nope, I think you covered all
Okay.
of the main questions. Thank you so much, Terrance, for your
Okay.
time and for extending our career spotlight a little bit extra. We appreciate